When I compare this to my very first Sub2 deal, I probably put into this project 20 times the amount of energy and work. I don't think that's an exaggeration. I probably put in like 1/20th of the amount of work and time to do my first Sub2 and then sell that with seller financing. Hey, welcome back to Sub2 Investor. My name is Hans, and in this episode, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to talk about the first property I ever purchased as a real estate investment. I didn't purchase it creatively, and this story is going to reveal a little bit about why I got into creative financing in particular. For a lot of you guys, you think that I only do Sub2 transactions, but that's not true. I actually started my investing journey listening to BRRRR. I was a huge BRRRR podcast follower, and I really thought that the BRRRR strategy, if you're not familiar, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, was going to be my path to financial freedom. The reason I got into real estate in the first place was to be financially free. I had a career in higher education. I was a graduate student, a PhD student, and I wanted real estate to be a backup plan and to pad my small professor salary, which I was thinking I was going to have for the rest of my life. Little did I know that plan B with real estate would become my plan A, and I still hope to go back to my intellectual days of reading and researching and writing and teaching. Different topic, but I thought that the path to my financial freedom would be through the BRRRR strategy, buying houses cash and then rehabbing them, doing a significant renovation, refinancing out my equity, putting a tenant in the property, and then just doing this again and again and again. And a lot of you guys out there are wondering what the best strategies are to get into real estate. And so it's going to be helpful to hear my perspective as somebody who has done that multiple times. Mind you, even after I got into creative finance, I've still done a few BRRRRs since then. However, I want to share with you the story. You might find some resonances in it for your own personal journey. And I think it's going to shed light on why creative finance is just such a powerful tool. Why, if you're thinking about getting into real estate, if you want to buy real estate, either to get that monthly cash flow to escape your job, or just for future investment purposes, for retirement planning, things of that nature, creative finance, guys, it holds the key in so many ways. And I hope that this story can illustrate that. So let me give you a little bit of background on this property. This was the first property I ever purchased, even before I owned a primary residence. I was a graduate student up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, studying early Judaism and ancient Christianity, getting a PhD in that. And my graduate stipend, as a graduate TA that they pay you to be a PhD student and be an assistant in some of the grad classes and undergrad classes, it was just shy of $20,000 a year. And I thought that was awesome because I was getting paid to study and to be at school. Right? And this was a 5-year program. So that's about $100,000 that they paid me and to be there for 5 years. And eventually I wrote my dissertation. In my 5th year, I was finishing my dissertation and getting ready for graduation. And that's when we were about to have our first child. And I thought, man, we got to pull the trigger on real estate now while I'm really getting into the weeds of this BRRRR universe and buying with cash and all this kind of thing. We were planning to move down to St. Louis because that's where my wife's family is from with our firstborn, and with the uncertainty in the academic job market, really was rough times, especially when COVID hit, and really competitive, like uber hyper competitive job market in my field. So I knew that it was going to be a struggle to find a job right away. So I was planning for a few years, maybe I teach adjuncts at a university nearby, which is what I ended up doing. But our plan was eventually, let's just move to St. Louis unless I land a job somewhere else. And because we were planning to move there, I decided to start looking for real estate properties in the market where I was going to be moving to. So I started actually looking for my first house to buy cash virtually, right? So I was trying to network through BRRRR forums and online with St. Louis real estate investors, people who might be able to help me find a property, rehab it, and then manage it as a rental. So I found somebody through BRRRR on their online forum who has a local small coaching group here, and really they offer kind of a turnkey service, especially for out-of-state investors. Now, I got lucky that the one I found was actually well-intentioned and did a decent job. And I'm friends with this individual to this day, a really great guy. And I'm really thankful for the services that he provided me. But the reason I give you that caveat is because a lot of people, out-of-state investors, get taken for a wild ride by folks who offer such services. And so I kind of hate to say that because I happen to luck out and find somebody good. But I've heard so many stories since then, story after story after story after story, of investors in California, New Jersey, New York, wherever, Florida, who are looking to invest in the Midwest where cash flow is good, and they find somebody who does all of the things. They can buy a property, they are a broker, then they are also a general contractor, so they can rehab your property, and then they also own a property management company, so they can manage the rental. So they can do everything for you, but just be careful if you go down that path. I'm telling you now, be very, very careful, because I know firsthand dozens of people who've been burned by such services. They were just trying to take advantage of these out-of-state investors with a lot of money. I'm just going to be honest right there. Thankfully, I lucked out and I did vet this guy quite a bit. And so I felt comfortable. He was down to earth, not trying to do one over on me. Although he was smart in offering a turnkey solution, because at every step of the way, he was able to make some money on my investment. So it worked out well for me. It worked out well for him. So I was searching for a property virtually, and I bought my first property virtually, which is kind of cool to think about that. I was in Milwaukee and I bought the property in St. Louis. Now, I had actually saved up the cash to buy this property myself. Okay, I was maybe early 30s, early to mid 30s, and throughout my entire adult life, I had my finances put together. I never made a lot of money. I always, I was teaching either drum lessons, private drum lessons, DJing from time to time, or I was teaching adjunct or doing graduate school to make some money. All of these gigs are extremely low paying, okay? And they're like gigs, 1099 type gigs that don't pay very much. However, I was able to save money through my 20s. I lived extremely frugally, got really cheap rent whenever I could. I was able to rent places from my friends. They only charged me a couple $100. Stuff like that. I was able to save up some cash in my savings account despite not having really a corporate job or anything like that. So really following the Dave Ramsey kind of stuff, right? So I used my own cash to buy this property. I'm going to show you this property here in a second and the closing statement, because I still have those. But I was putting my hard-earned money into this because I believed in it. It made sense to me. And St. Louis is a good market for cash flow, good market for rentals. And I really researched what neighborhoods I wanted to buy in. Even so much so, guys, that I was in the Facebook groups and I was watching videos of the town halls that were recorded and posted of the individual neighborhoods. And I was like, oh man, this neighborhood, it's on the trajectory, like the path of progress. You can still get in at a good price. It's not like the super gentrified area yet, but it could be in 5 to 10 years. And it seems like good people there. So I leveraged this contact I had who owned a brokerage. He set me up with a real estate agent. Great guy. His name's Brian Miller. I'm still friends with him to this day, who was my agent who represented me. And he went down and he did some virtual walkthroughs of several properties. And this property, the one I ended up buying, was actually listed on the MLS by a wholesaler who had it under contract and wasn't finding the buyer that they needed. So they put it on the MLS, and that's how my real estate agent found this property. So at the end of the day, the wholesaler got paid, although it really wasn't very much because he overpaid for it. His contract price was too high. But the wholesaler got paid something, the real estate agent got paid something, and they bought it with cash. Now let me show you this property because, it was an ideal flip. Really, it was an ideal BRRRR type house where really it just needed probably 30 to 40K if I'm honest, but I only put like 20K into it. Let me pull up pictures of the property here. All right, so here are photos of the property. This house was set back in the lot. It had a partial small basement, so it wasn't a slab, but it was kind of close to being a slab. Honestly, it was like a half basement and then a very, very low clearance, like 5-foot clearance basement ceilings, which feel very, very cramped. And, this house was approximately 100 years old. So in St. Louis City, most of the houses are that old that you buy. If you take a look at it from the outside, it has some curb appeal. If you power washed that concrete slab there, that would help you out a lot. But now looking on the inside of the property, you can see that it's got carpet in the main living areas, and it really needed to be painted. Junk needed to be moved. Light fixtures needed to be updated. That ugly paneling on the wall needed to be dealt with. That flooring, again, was pretty nasty. I honestly might have been able to keep it with a thorough clean, but I ended up tearing it all up and putting vinyl plank flooring in. I'll show you photos of that. The paint job was really horrendous. So again, just really needed a solid painting, and like this wood trim around the window needed to be painted white. All the trim needed to be touched up. There needed to be a door put on that closet. There was actually a massive hole in the drywall behind this photo right there. This trim, the door jamb, needed to be painted white. Again, this drop ceiling was really kind of yellow, so it needed to be painted. And this light fixture, this one was actually okay, but I have a long story about this particular room that I want to tell you. This faux brick was kind of nasty, so we took that faux brick down over here and just replaced it with just drywall. But this room, if you take a look at the walls, you can notice the funky texture on these walls right here. Kind of looks like plaster or stucco. Stucco actually is what it looks like, but I'm not exactly sure what was going on. This was drywall and not plaster. But in my mind, I needed to skim coat this entire room to get flat looking walls to make it look normal. And I had never done any rehab to a house before. So I was really cutting my teeth on actual real estate rehabbing. And I needed somebody to tell me not to skim coat this entire room, because I'm telling you right now, I drove down to St. Louis to actually see this property before I closed on it. Well, and then I drove down there during spring break after I closed on this property, and I spent 5 days down here just skim coating this entire room, which if you don't know what skim coating is, it is not easy. You're taking a thin layer of mud and you're coating the entire wall to make it a smooth texture. And that's for experienced drywall guys to do, okay? It's actually pretty difficult to do. And when I showed this property to a contractor friend of mine who was down there, he looked at the room and said, "Hans, this looks awesome. You did a great job skim coating this. How long did this take?" And I was like, 5 12-hour days. And he was like, dude, that's crazy. Why would you ever do that? And I said, yeah, I have regrets about that. So, you get into real estate, you get excited about the property, you overanalyze, you overfixate on things that need to be done. And people like me are going to sit here and tell you not to do that. Sometimes you just learn by experience and by error. And in this example, I wish I would have just painted the walls. They would have looked fine. With that texture, with like a flat type sheen, that texture wouldn't be as noticeable. And this house isn't an upscale house. This is a lower end type house, and you could totally get away with probably even the carpet, honestly, and just a nice fresh coat of paint. But nobody told me that at that time when I needed to hear that, and so I was left to my own devices. So yes, I actually did end up rehabbing about half of this house. This room, some of the windows were janky and needed to be replaced actually. And a lot of this was just, cosmetic. This is actually, the bones on this house were solid, but there were a lot of small things. The ceiling needed to be painted in every single room. And the furnace, the air handler, is actually in this closet here on the first floor in the master bedroom, which wasn't really super awesome, unfortunately. And this door to the outside was also in the master bedroom. So kind of funky, not ideal of a layout. There's the air handler. Older furnace, I ended up having to replace it after I did the refinance. And I wish I would have just done it before I put a tenant in there, because then my cost basis would have been less and my capital gains would have been less. So stuff like that, which I wasn't thinking about when I closed and rehabbed the property. But you learn after the fact. And here's the kitchen. That faux brick was so nasty. Thankfully, the appliances worked, even though they were a little dirty. And I hand painted these cabinets myself. I'll show you. I'm very proud of the quality of work, but painting oak cabinets takes a long time. And I have done it now, I think 3 times, and I'm never doing it again. I'm never doing it again. I think I said that after the first and second time. So there's the kitchen, cute little kitchen, and a nice little pony window there, I guess we'll call it. Had to redo the flooring because of warped laminate. Replaced it with vinyl. And a really dinky bathroom here, just super tiny, 1 bath house. This was a 3-bedroom, 1 bath house, but the length of this shower is really small. And there just are some funky things about this property. It didn't have any designated parking, so only parking on the streets. You have to walk the whole front yard to get to the house. And then the basement, as you can see, super small clearance. It's nice that there even was a basement, but a lot of this plumbing had to be redone. And it's nice to have a washer and dryer in the house, but you have to really crouch if you're taller than 5.5 feet to be down there. So really, this is kind of more of a rental property than like an owner finance type property, but you could probably sell it on a lease and option. Well, actually, that's what we're doing. But I did have at least 2 tenants in here before we decided to go down that route. Didn't have to mess with the electrical and the water heater since those are updated. So let me show you what we did with this house on the rehab. Okay, I went and got professional photos like it was recommended to me. And so now you're looking at the after photos of this property. So I didn't pressure wash this giant slab. Probably might have made a difference, but the house, I think I cleaned it with some soap and water, some of the vinyl siding, but really a good old pressure wash might have been called for, but I didn't do it. I replaced the shutters, I believe, on the house to make it look nice, and just cleaned up the landscaping, just put a couple mums out there, and wow, what a difference. This is not a fancy rehab whatsoever, but I painted and did the vinyl plank flooring, and I had a contractor, that fellow that I told you about, his contractor came in, he replaced all the light fixtures, did some taping and mudding, and a few other odds and ends. I think I put in about $20,000 material and labor, and my labor mainly. Had I hired out my jobs, this could have easily have been a $35,000 rehab, but I installed this vinyl plank and I painted the entire house. It took me, I was down at this property once we moved here, like for 2 solid months, just figuring things out about how a house works. But the after product was really nice, and I'm really proud of the quality of work, but was it worth my time? Was it worth 2 entire months of my time? I don't know. I do think that you have to have extreme grace and forgiveness on the very first deal you do. Grace with yourself, because you are going to just get so many things wrong. You just don't want the deal to be a total catastrophe. That's what you're really trying to aim for on your first deal. You don't want it to be a catastrophe. So even if it's not the biggest win, even if it's just a single base hit, right? You get to first base, like that is a massive victory. And that's what I think this property was. So you can see, really, we just replaced the light fixtures, painted, replaced the floor, and the whole thing smelled and looked better. And take a look at those kitchen cabinets. Oh my goodness. Amazing, brand new looking kitchen cabinets, hand painted by yours truly with 3 coats. 1 coat of Kills, right? Oil-based paint. I learned a lot about that. Guys, hire this stuff out. I'm serious. It'll take all of your freaking time. So this could have been a $35K rehab easily, but I think I was under 20, a little under 20 on it. And we got some nice photos, and we placed a tenant in this property, I think within about 4 months of closing on it, maybe just between 3 and 4 months. So we closed on it in June. I got down there and was running around, pulling my hair out, trying to figure things out. being super slow and super dumb about everything. And then we placed the tenant in there in October, and we're able to then go to the bank and do a refinance. Now, let me show you the closing statement so that you can see what numbers we're talking about here. Let me show you. Okay, so this was the closing statement when I went to buy the house with cash. You can see right here, the purchase price was $52,500. The real estate buyer agent fee was $2,500. That was the minimum on the contract. The agent got paid $2,500. Then I believe the agent paid the wholesaler. It might have been $1,000 or something like that. In my opinion, I got a pretty good deal here, right? Because I could have easily gotten price gouged by any of the parties involved. My closing costs and whatnot, everything totaled approximately almost $56,000. Okay. So I brought in $52,000. I put about $20K into it. So I was all in for about $72,000 or so. And then let me show you on the refinance. Now I have regrets on the refinance as well as on the rehab, like I just talked about. Let me show you the refinance. So my thought, so really what I should have done, guys, I should have taken out as much equity as I possibly could have. Okay. If I could have taken out $80,000, I should have done it. Okay. But in my stupid mind at the time, my scarcity mindset mind, if I could take out less money, even leave a little bit of money in the deal, then my mortgage payment would be smaller and my cash flow would be greater. And so what I was really excited about was cash flow on my rental properties, right? Because I wanted to scale 10 rental properties, cash flowing, $300 a month. Then I could have $3,000 a month of passive income to live off of. Little did I know that rental properties don't work that way. The cash flow is unreliable. I would need a lot more than 10 doors to even get to that number, to get close to that number. And I didn't realize that my equity that I was leaving in the deal was just sitting there and I wasn't getting a return on that equity. And I had a really good interest rate on the loan when I refinanced. I believe the interest rate was about 3%. And so I could have been leveraging even more. Look at right here. So let me show you. I only refinanced out $60,000. And I was about $72,000 in. So I recouped my cash investment, which I had in the property when I bought it. But all the money I paid for the rehab and the renovation, I didn't recapture all that on the refinance. I have a regret about that. So I've only been leveraging $60,000 at 3%, where I could have been leveraging $80,000, like an additional 20 grand at a 3% amazing 30-year fixed interest rate. You're probably wondering, how did you refinance this? Did you do it in your LLC? How? I refinanced this into my own personal name with my credit, my wife's W-2 job. I was able to get a 30-year fixed loan. In fact, I think that this house might have only been in my wife's name, right? I think it might have just been her on the loan. And then after the fact, we quit claimed it into both of our names and then later into a trust and then into my LLC as the beneficiary. And that's a whole different story because we hold all our properties in trusts. And I think you should think about doing that too, because trusts can be amazing vehicles to hold properties in. But my point is that I even made an error on this refinance. And even though I had a smaller monthly payment with a lesser loan amount, rents eventually went up, especially when COVID hit and the cash flow increased. And so I could have easily have handled like a $50 or a $80 increase to my monthly payment. This was stupid not to refinance out the entire amount of equity. But there you go. There's the closing statement on my refinance. So what are some of the key lessons and key takeaways from this long and drawn out story? Well, first lesson is don't ever skim coat an entire room yourself. Okay, leave that to the professionals, right? Lesson 2, yes, it's good to get in there and swing a hammer and learn about houses, but your time is not well spent rehabbing houses. Your time is better spent finding great deals, finding motivated sellers, orchestrating a deal, and leveraging other people's money, time, and skills to get a deal done. Lesson 3, and this isn't something I've talked about yet, this took a long time. This process from beginning to end, I'm talking about from when I started looking for the property to buy and then closed on it to after I rehabbed it and I placed a tenant in there, which was its own drama and learning experience, and then refinancing it. That took about 6 months because there's a seasoning requirement for refinancing. You have to hold the property 6 months before you can refinance into a Fannie Freddie type loan. So this took an extraordinary long period of time before I made my money back, or most of my money back. And in terms of scalability of this business model, I could not imagine doing this at scale to build a portfolio without a big team that I build and manage on a daily basis. Because of the amount of rehab and work that needs to go into this kind of project, you would need multiple crews working on multiple properties at all times to be forcing the appreciation of the house that you buy to be able to refinance it. Okay, because that's the trick. That's the bread and butter of the BRRRR strategy, is buying at a discount with cash, but then forcing the appreciation through rehab. So you have to become a general contractor. You might think that, oh, I'll just hire a general contractor. Well, guess what? How do you know they're not screwing you over without basically becoming a general contractor yourself? Like going through and seeing the scope of work and understanding everything that needs to be done and if it's done well or not. To get to that level of expertise, guys, you've basically got to become a general contractor. That's what I truly believe. People are going to argue with that and contradict that, but bring it on. I don't think you can really be a rehabber without knowing stuff about houses and how to work on houses, at least to some reasonably competent degree. It's not going to happen. So now the fourth thing I learned was that managing tenants was more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Even placing a good qualified tenant in the house took a tremendous amount of time and energy and vetting. And my goodness, that process took multiple weeks to tie it all up and meet with the tenant and grab their security deposit and vet them, call their landlords, do all the checks, get all the paperwork signed, and then try and establish a relationship. And then when they're late on their first or second payment, knowing how to interact with them to get your money and not create an antagonistic relationship. In other words, I quickly realized I'm going to have to learn how to be a property manager, right? I could hire out property management, which I eventually did, and I want to talk about that later. But they are not going to care nearly as much as you are. Like, they're going to care like 30 to 40% of what you're going to care. And if you really want your rental properties to perform, you should manage them yourself. And that's what I've heard so many people say from time and time again. And my experience rings true with that. I think unless you're doing multifamily, that's probably a good rule of thumb to abide by, unless you have a lot of means, a large reserve account to deal with stuff when crap hits the fan, and you can afford to hire a full-time salaried employee with skin in the game to manage your properties well, and you train them. Okay, that's a different scenario. But that was lesson number 4. It's very difficult to manage tenants, and I had to go down there a couple times to make it clear that I needed my money or I needed to take action. And so this all leads to my concluding remarks, and I hope that this story of my first rental property has been elucidating to you, just to share my experience, my sort of off-the-cuff feelings about it. It got me into the game. So this, I would say, number 5 is, you have to get into the game, and you have got to take that step to dive into the cold water. And it's cold. There's no getting around it. And you're not sure if you're swimming up or you're down and you're disoriented. But I am so glad that I was able to take this step, because I started to get excited about real estate. I was so looking forward to getting my first rental income and cash flow. And thankfully, it wasn't a catastrophe where something went wildly wrong and I got burned. I avoided that pitfall. So this was a success, and really that's all we should be looking for on our first deal, in my opinion, is just to get by with a reasonable level of moderate success, just getting to first base. And this deal got me in the game. However, I do have to, admit that I was somewhat disillusioned with the process, especially after I did it a second time. And a few months later, I just thought, man, this is not scalable. And taking a step back, when I compare this to my very first Sub2 deal, I probably put into this project 20 times the amount of energy and work. I don't think that's an exaggeration. I probably put in like 1/20th of the amount of work and time to do my first Sub2 and then sell that with seller financing. And what's really important to me, and this is, I guess we'll call this our sixth lesson, is the importance of velocity in this business model and in real estate in general. It's great to spend a lot of time to learn the process of real estate in one particular business model of real estate and to learn it really well and to get that education through trial and error. But there comes a point where, guys, life isn't that long. Time goes by fast. And unless we can be doing multiple deals, we need to be doing more than just one deal every 6 months. At least I know I needed to if I was going to reach my goals. And so the importance of velocity in your business is paramount, in my opinion. And that's why I'm drawn to creative finance, because if I can pick a property up, be in it a little bit, have even just a little bit of cash in it, just like I left a little bit of cash in this one, but then I can get it operating and performing so much faster if I don't have to do a massive rehab on it, and I can begin getting a return on my investment within 30 days, possibly, right? Which with a BRRRR strategy is virtually very, very difficult to do. So none of my own money, my own credits, no property management because I'm placing a tenant buyer or a wrap end buyer in there who's going to be a borrower and not a tenant, okay? Property management I don't have to deal with because I can have my notes serviced by a third-party servicer. And then general contractors, right? I don't have to be a general contractor. I just need the house to be livable and presentable, and it can produce income for me. So these are so many of the benefits of creative finance, and I think it becomes so much more obvious why, if you're considering doing the traditional model of real estate or one of the traditional models like the BRRRR strategy, and you're wondering, is that right for me? Or maybe is creative finance a better option to pursue? Well, then I think this video gives some clarity and insight into that question and a helpful perspective as well. So if you found this episode interesting and valuable, then please, share your thoughts, leave me a comment, make sure to smash that like button, boost the algorithm. I appreciate your valuable time and participation in this real estate journey that we're all on. Until next time, stay creative. Peace.